I laid awake the entire night with incredible disbelief. Rolled over around 6 a.m., picked up my phone, and I Googled what to do after an affair. And I'm like, this is me now. I'm Googling this? Were those people? This is so unfair. So unfair.
We were at a breakfast together.
Yep.
And you're sitting there, and we were like two people apart, and you're talking, you're motioning, and I was like, what is that on your, what did you write there? And the tattoo says forgiven, but it says forgive first, and then the N is a little bit like off. It's like written differently. I mean, I can't see it now, but it said something to that effect. And we're all talking about whatever our business is and whatever else is going on. And I just couldn't help but wonder, going, okay, it's not somebody's name. It's not a
Girls talking along with their hands. Have you stopped noticing it? Yeah.
I'm known for doing that. Right. So I do that a lot.
Yeah.
But it's a way we express. And I was like very, very curious as like, why would someone pick that to have a tattoo and I imagine it has something to do with reminding yourself, all the time that that this is your way. So yeah, like where does Stéphanie start from? I mean, is it something that is like you experience in what you did as a professional? Is it something that you walk through as like kind of life comes at you? Where does it start for Stéphanie?
Well, it can be all of those things.
Oh, yeah?
Because certainly there's a lot that you need to forgive in business or work-related circumstances and situations because, work is also humans.
Right. But when did you first start realizing you go back?
Yeah. So the story of why I intentionally got that tattooed on my right arm, on my wrist, so that I would see it often because that's my dominant hand. And you're right, it's now broken and in a cast. Was
amazing how like the universe has a way of telling you, did you say dominant hand?
Yes.
I'm going to break that. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. And actually, when I was having the surgery, the surgeon afterwards apologized. He's like, I kind of messed up the F a little bit because we had to put stitches there. So I'm curious to see what it's going to look like after I, take this off and have the stitches and everything removed. But
tattoo just keeps evolving.
And it's probably going to have to be redone, perhaps, or at this point, the reason for getting that particular word on my wrist was because I needed to forgive somebody who hurt me very deeply. I wrote it out. I had it done probably about 10 years ago now, and I was showing it to a friend of mine, and I had two ideas. One was like an infinity symbol, and it had love in it, and then I also had forgive. And I showed it to my friend, and she was rightly said, also, you've been forgiven of a lot too, so I don't think it's just one way. I think you need to include yourself in that. So that's why the N is like a little kind of add-on. There's a little flourish, and then the N is apart from the word forgive. And the reason for that was being hurt by somebody who I love and trusted incredibly. I'm not embarrassed to share the story because I think that it's very helpful. And my husband and I have agreed, and he's given me permission to share, and I've written about it, and I've been on other podcasts, and we now use our story of infidelity to help other people. I help a lot of women who have been betrayed and where trust is broken to find themselves again, to find love, to rebuild trust, to rebuild a life that feels full and exciting and is not devastated. So in our marriage, we did experience infidelity. Very sadly, it's not something that we hoped for. I don't think anybody stands at the altar and exchanges vows and says, maybe in a few years I might just be breaking these. I think we honestly come to them with authority and with a real determination that I'm keeping these promises to you, most important person in my life. So it was an experience that I'll never forget. I can forgive, but not forget. And I think anybody who has a very devastating experience in their life where forgiveness is required, you never forget. And anybody who says, forgive and forget, just like move on. Sure, you can move forward with that hurt and pain and injury and remembering what happened in your life. And you can move forward with the lessons learned and the experience and what it brought you through and to. But to say, I've forgotten about that is ludicrous. I mean, unless I had a lobotomy, you never forget something where that kind of trust has been severely broken and smashed. So that's the story of my tattoo, Mohammed. Thanks for asking.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had no idea.
No.
And so when as you're talking about it, I mean, and like a marriage is like one of the most like the
sacred.
biggest promises anyone out there will make to another person. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Just yesterday, I'm talking with people who I'm working with. I'm training in a class, and it's a cardio class, and we were talking about goals that we had set in January. And then I asked, does anyone remember their goal? I left it alone for a while. And I thought, we make promises. How do we feel when, literally I said, how do we feel when somebody breaks their promise to us? As if in that moment they forgot that there was even a promise. And sometimes they actually forget the promise altogether. And who's the most important person that's ever going to make a promise to you? And this is all I said to them was like, the most important promise that's ever made to me is the one that I would have to imagine now is the one I made to myself. But this is very, very big when we put that much value, that much love, that much trust in someone else. And so we were just talking about the exact same thing literally last night. And I was like, you know what? So how are we doing with our promise to ourselves? And you're right. There's got to be forgiveness also to ourselves. But in this case, when I don't know, is it something to do with power? Is it something to do with, like when somebody makes a promise to us, is there this feeling that it's a human being, by the way, who's making a promise, who's fallible? We knew that. Right? Mm-hmm. Does somebody's promise to us, and I'm just thinking here, if it was made to me, when somebody makes me a promise, one of the elements that I would have to say is that there's a sense of obligation now somebody has to me to keep that promise, which gives me power over that person. And if they fail to keep up their promise to me, my power is for a second non-existent. I don't have that power of that obligation. I'm just being a little bit, just a completely different perspective here. So they owe me to keep this promise. Mm-hmm. It's the right thing to do. That it's a marriage is a whole other level of promise. But just a promise in its own sort of sense of the word, let's just say, creates an obligation.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. There's definitely an obligation. I mean, that's why we would put ourselves in that position, right? It's risky. I mean, love is risky.
Big time.
And making a promise to somebody else for the rest of your life is risky. The risk is that if you don't adhere to the promises that you've made, where does that leave me? There's a huge loss, right? There's 100%. The loss of, in my case, the swirling confusion was there's this huge loss of who we were, who I thought we were, right. Who I thought you were, about our future. Like, is everything just a lie? It's a very overwhelming time of confusion and destruction. And it's a incredible sideswipe. It came out of nowhere. As far as I was concerned, it came out of nowhere. I will say that my husband accepted full responsibility for it, never once pointed a finger at me and said, well, if you had performed better or done something differently or, didn't do this or did that, then I wouldn't have, made this choice. And it was a choice. He never once put any of that on me. I looked for it because I'm a fixer.
There was a thought, right?
I'm a fixer. I am a control freak. I want to ensure that if I know what the problem was, I could fix that so it would never happen again. So therefore, I could protect myself against this injury again, against this loss.
So you actually felt like there was a blame to be shared on your part?
I wanted there to be something, because when you know what the problem is, you can therefore fix it and get out in front of it. Like, it's really interesting. When somebody has a disease or an illness or even dies, the first thing we ask is like, what happened? Sure, we're curious, but in the back of our mind, it's like, if I know what happened to them and then I can get out in front of it and protect myself against it, I can prevent that from happening to me.
But that wasn't your first reaction when you hear this.
Oh my gosh, no.
Can you tell me? Can I ask?
Oh my gosh. It's like a shock beyond all belief. The stages of grief are real in every form of loss, right? In every form of, you don't have to lose a loved one to experience grief. So shock was first, like, incredible. This is not happening to us. You're joking. But of course, I know my husband well enough to know, like, he would never joke about something like that. And the seriousness on his face told otherwise. I lost it because I have anger. And so I just...
Oh, you're human.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're all...
But there are some people who, suppress anger. Right. I'm demonstrative with my anger. It's okay. It comes out. I yell and scream. I break things. People are very aware when I'm angry. It's something that I've worked on, and I can now, manage it better.
It's got wheels, right? Okay.
Yeah, right. I can't punch you with my good arm. So, this one's not going to do anything.
Something tells me that's going to hurt the same.
Yeah.
It's got the ring
if
on
it needs to. That's right. Yeah. It was very shocking. So I won't bore you with all the details, but it was a regular Thursday evening in the summertime, 13
Comes at you
years
out
ago.
of nowhere.
I was hosting a youth group in my house. To be honest, the chips were still on the table. I went to go to the drugstore to get some milk because realizing that we didn't have any for morning coffee, and it was around 11 p.m. And my husband's, he's a corporate guy by day, but he's a musician. So he was out at band practice and typically came home very late from band practice. And so this was 11 o'clock, and I was like delighted, like, oh my goodness, you're home already. Let's have date night. But I'm going to go out to Shoppers and get milk. And he's like, right now, because he needed to tell me. So I said, yeah, I'll just be a couple of minutes. Got a text from him, you on your way home, which was very unusual. I was like, yeah, I'm doing my thing, trying on lipstick and checking magazines and getting what I need at Shoppers. Got home, and his face just told otherwise, like something is seriously wrong here. So I'm still holding a big bottle of Tide, big carton of milk. He tells me right away, I lost it. I threw the Tide at him, put a hole in the wall, threw the carton of milk. There was still like smears on the ceiling from, the seal test label. And then I ranted and raved and couldn't believe it. And then we did something incredibly normal, Mohammed. It's like I was exhausted. He was exhausted. And we couldn't do anything because it was probably 1 a.m. There was a bunch of laundry on our bed. We just stood there and folded laundry, put it away, went to bed. He slept because he was exhausted, and I laid awake the entire night with incredible disbelief. Rolled over around 6 a.m., picked up my phone, and I Googled what to do after an affair. And I'm like, this is me now. I'm Googling this? Were those people? This is so unfair. So unfair. And then the tears came.
Well, when you stayed awake that night, you didn't Google it then.
No.
Were you?
I couldn't move. I couldn't move.
Just like
just eyes open.
You can't keep a thought for 3 seconds.
No, just sort of stared at the clock.
They say, like, when you see the storm clouds kind of first coming in, right? Okay, and the storm's coming. Then when you're in the storm, it looks like it's never going to pass. And so, but you're just now at the beginning of this, and this is not something that's like, hey, tomorrow it's going to be sunny again, right?
Yeah.
Did you start
shock.
Like, you start like now preparing? This is going to be a long road. What do you?
No, because you're so overwhelmed. I mean, I was so overwhelmed, and this is true of anybody who is in extreme shock. Your chemicals are flooding. You can't keep a logical thought. You can't start rationalizing, okay, well, the process is going to be, we're going to wake up, and then we're going to, talk to wise people in our life, in our community, and figure out what we're supposed to do next. And then we're going to, you can't do that. It's impossible. The next stage of grief is bargaining too. You start going through, and then it's like this huge floodgate of like, woulda, coulda, shoulda. What did I do wrong? When did this start happening? Why didn't I see the signs? How stupid am I? All of that. Like it bombards you, and that's where we were at. So when I started crying, he woke up immediately and just said, "I'm going to call Jerry." That was our pastor. And I'm like, "No, not at 6 a.m. Who's coming to our house for that? No, I want to keep this quiet. Like this, I don't want anybody to know about this. This is crazy. Like, this is not us. We're not those people. We're the people that people come to and say, how do you make it work? You guys are so happy. You're each other's best friends." And that's not smoke and mirrors. That was real. So I don't want to talk to anybody about this. Like, and it's like, well, it's kind of too late because it's out there. So
that's the other thing that you just said is like, you're the ones who everybody goes to for. You're the opposite end is, so now it's like, like you said, like, if that's a lie, what else am I wrong about? And you start saying, I've not been in the same situation, but thinking about like, I'm wrong about everything. Mm-hmm. Nothing is making sense anymore. Mm-hmm. Nothing is. So even your thought about what to do next, is that even the right move anymore? Like,
well, you're numb. There's no real what to do next. I was a complete zombie that day, and probably for the next weeks coming. So then it becomes the process of inviting other people in to help you heal.
Sure.
Which is not my go-to.
100%.
I'm self-sufficient. I'm independent. I'm strong. I make things work out. Nobody needs to tell me what to do. In fact, previous to that, like 46 years of living, anybody who was in therapy, while I would say, oh, okay, good for you, in my mind was like, why are you so weak? Why do you need therapy? What kind of issues do you have? Can't you just figure it out? Life's not that bad, sister. Like, pull up your socks and let's go. Not anymore.
Suck it up, buttercup, all this stuff.
Right. Because that's how I grew up too.
But Steph, you skip over, you say for the next few weeks. That's a long time, actually.
Well, next few weeks, next few months, next few years. Really? The recovery time, honestly, for something like that, and we did go to counseling. We did all the things. Like, we just cleared a schedule, and it was like, we are going into restoration mode and seeing if we can make this work, And we both made a promise to each other to do all the things. So counseling twice a week, together, independently, recovery group. I hired a life coach. We didn't go out. We canceled all of our personal activities. Of course, we took our kids to their activities, but anything extracurricular outside of our work and being home was canceled. And it was a 2 to 5 year process, and I would say it probably took us about 7 to really completely heal.
That's a long way.
Yep.
And you don't know this at the beginning.
Of course not. If I knew that, I probably wouldn't have stayed.
It would have said, would you have said that? So that was my question is like, did you even think, you don't even think it's possible? Do you think it's possible even? Like, you're starting to take the next steps. They are the steps to take in retrospect. Mm-hmm. But you have to, at some point in time, like there's a fight or flight for it, right? Like you're staying to do something. What caused you, would you say, to not flight?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because my tendency is to fight or fly. In that moment, I just froze. I mean, that's your sympathetic nervous system does, one of those three, right? That's how you react to stressful situations. I just froze because I had no wherewithal to manage this in my life. It was something that I never, ever, ever thought would happen. So I had no preconceived ideas about how I would handle it.
Right.
Of course, I've seen it and the statistics are out there, and it's not like I didn't know about it, but it wasn't going to happen in my life. I had predicted other scenarios where, great harm might come. What if something happens to my kids? What if we lose jobs? What if we lose our house? Fire, like all kinds of catastrophes. And I'm not a catastrophic type of person. I don't think about those things. I'm not always in there, but I just kind of like, hey, if this ever happened, it would be hard, but I'd get through it. This one, infidelity, never appeared in my brain cells at all. In fact, I was the kind of person who was like, if that ever happened to me, I would not stay. Not stay, not for 1 second. Somebody cheats me, I'm out. Done.
So you knew this about yourself?
Never say never. Never say never. And you know what? A good friend of mine, about a year later when we were sitting down and I was sharing the story, she said, Stephanie, honestly, we're all capable of that. We're all capable of it. Just some of us have stronger boundaries.
So when you're getting yourself at that point in time just to the next moment, just to the next day, right? And that's really all it is.
It truly is one day at a time, one moment at a time. Yeah.
Right. Because you don't know when something's going to pass like this. If it's going to pass, in fact, right? So when you have a starting point, you go, hey, this is what I'm. When did you, like, if you're thinking back, start actually saying to yourself, okay, well, because life doesn't stop. You still have all the other things that are happening.
That's the hardest part. It's really the hardest part.
Because if you could freeze everything and focus on this, okay, but that's not how it works.
And if the entire world, all 8 billion people, could just stop for a moment and go, Stephanie, that's so devastating. Wow.
Right.
But people don't, obviously. Right. People continue on. So it was really difficult to just do mundane things like go to the grocery store, and I'd look around at all of the people and think, how is it that you're whistling while you're picking your cereal off that counter? Don't you know what happened to me? People do get through things and you gain perspective, but in that moment, it feels so harsh that you have to be dealing with this by yourself. In reality, I wasn't, because I surrendered to the support of wise people and professionals and friends and family who were coming alongside us and praying for us and loving on us and dropping off food and, can I take care of your kids for you guys? And here, we've got a gift card for you to go out for date night. How can, 1:30 in the morning, I remember texting one of my best friends who's a psychologist, and I was having a panic attack. Well, actually, I didn't text her. My husband did. Had my first panic attack, and he's like, I don't know what to do. He drove over, she gave him a little tiny Ativan pill. Now I'm on medication. What the? You put me in this position of requiring medication, counseling, therapy. So it was a long time where I was angry at him for putting me in this position. How unfair. But then eventually I found the opportunity in betrayal. And the opportunity was working on myself. Yes, I wanted our marriage to survive because my husband had done something that caused me to look at him through a different lens, but I also saw him for who he was and who he still was. That didn't go away. It got cloudy, of course. It got tainted because of this one critical, terrible choice that he made. But when I saw the remorse in him almost immediately, and his desire to want to do everything that he could to fix, to restore, to show me that this would never happen again, I just took it, like you said, it was one moment at a time. It was me just choosing to believe that could be possible if we did the things. And I watched, because I was never suspicious. I was never a person who would look through things. I never wanted to catch him doing something. I was very trusting. I was a very trustworthy person. And I had to now kind of backpedal a little bit and go, well, in order to rebuild trust, I need to see that there's behavioral change. I need to see that you are earnestly trying to allow me to trust you. So there's going to be things that need to change. I need to have full access to your life, which felt really intrusive. And,
And if you're trying to build trust, that's going the opposite way. If you got to now see everything, don't you think? I'm just being...
Yes and no. That's what you would expect. But when you are flooded with this tremendous
maybe that's how you build
despair,
trust, though, right?
You have to, because trust isn't built just because somebody says trust me.
Right.
In fact, I'm really leery of people trust me.
Right.
Really? Why? Why should I? What have you shown me that you, in your character and your behavior, not just your words, because words are flimsy, honestly. They're flimsy. Sure, they can start somewhere, but I want to see that you really mean what you say. That's integrity, right? So the only way for us to build it, and this was under the counsel of our therapist, she suggested there should be no holes in your schedules. You should know where your husband is at all times. I didn't really want to know where he was at all times, but I needed to in order to make sure that what he said he was doing and where he was going to be was actually truth. So in order to build trust, you have to have transparency. It's impossible without transparency and honesty. So every once in a while, just little check-ins. I had full access to all of his passcodes.
Right.
Everything was available to me.
Right.
So every once in a while, I would check in because I wanted to make sure that, that this was true. If he was at work, I knew, and then we also started to put the little tracker on the phone, not the tracker, but find my phone or know where my friend is or whatever it is. It was a safety measure to protect us and our marriage and the rebuild of our marriage. It wasn't so I could catch him doing something so that I could point my finger and fault him. I was actually trying to look for favor. Looking for favor, you have to be able to have the mechanics to do so. And then I would actually acknowledge that and say, thank you. You were where you said you were going to be. That helps me feel safe and helps me rebuild trust with you, which is what I want. And he appreciated that.
When you start saying to yourself, we are making progress.
Like when did that happen?
When
there was lots of one step forward, five back.
I'm not thinking when in terms of time, but in terms of was a state of mind or...
Yeah, I think...
What's progress defined as? So, when do you start feeling a little not so, as worse as it is? I don't want to say better, because is there such a thing?
Yeah, well, there's definitely progress, but the road to recovery from infidelity is a long one and does require 1 step forward, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. Are you able to tell this is a step
forward? This is a step forward?
Yes.
So what does that feel like?
It feels like peace, contentment, growth, honest conversations.
What's an honest conversation? After event like that,
we learned a lot about ourselves, and we gave each other permission to understand our love language, our love languages, how we like to be loved. And when we knew that about each other and were honest about saying, when you bring me flowers, it's lovely, but I don't really feel loved when you do that. When you unload the dishwasher, bring me coffee, or ask what I can do for you, that makes me feel loved. For my husband, it was quality time and physical touch. So there were many times when I didn't want him to hug me or I didn't want to be even close to him, but I knew that brought him a feeling of love and connection and intimacy. And so I would do things not because I felt like I wanted to, but that it would be in service of rebuilding our marriage. So helping somebody feel loved doesn't mean it feels necessarily comfortable for me. It's about the other person. It's sacrifice. So there was that, and then there was learning our fight language, which was really important. I flare up, I get loud, I have a tendency to even throw things. That would, scare him. He's a peacemaker. He wants peace and consensus and harmony. So therefore, he would just, suck that up and say, okay, fine. Yep, sounds good. And I would feel like I won. And he, for just keeping the peace, would feel like that was the right choice. But it wasn't what he wanted. So there was levels of resentment there.
Well, when you say, because let's just say there's a victim situation, right? Like if you ever looked at yourself that way, why would you say that you had to do anything?
Right. Because of my nature.
Okay.
I'm a fixer. Okay. So I want to know
because another person would like, you broke it, you fix it, I'm standing right here, right. You do the work.
Oh yeah. No, Mohammed, there were times like that when we were in recovery group. He started first, went for 4 months, and then he said, I think you could benefit from coming to this as well. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm not the one who broke the promise. I'm not the one with the problem. You are.
Right.
You keep going. And then he made, again, with strength and kindness, pointed something back to me and said, but you're the one with the hurt. And I've done as much as I can, and I will continue to do as much as I can. But I think you could benefit from receiving alternative help.
I think that's very profound. Because when we're in a situation like this, I imagine you're thinking, you're the one who owes something here. You're the one who needs to do something. To turn and reflect on that in terms of saying, I need to do something for me too. That's an interesting reflection there. I never thought of that.
Yeah. And it's the tone and the body language in which we learned how to speak to each other better. Not like our conversations weren't great before. We were each other's best friends. Grew up across the street from each other. We were friends since we were 16. Started dating when we were 18. We know each other so well. And, but there was a lot of growth and learning that we could do. And my husband was learning more about himself, his tendencies, his blind spots, the things that he never even knew about in his past, familial patterns of behavior. And he was learning all of that through his own self-discovery and willingness to understand himself through therapy, through recovery. And he was delighted about it. I remember one time he came home with this sheet and he jumps on the bed and says, do you know what codependency is? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, oh my gosh, I'm codependent. He's like, I check every box here except a couple of them. He's like, this is amazing. Now I know some of when you know what your blind spots are, when you know what your stressors are, when you know who you are and you're what's the word, brave enough, courageous enough to actually admit that, then you can work on it. Then you can actually become the person who you were meant to be. The scales have fallen off your eyes. The blinders have come off. You're like, oh my gosh. That's what he said. He's like, I put on glasses for the first time. I used to just see a tree with green leaves. Now I saw every leaf. It was like everything was becoming more clear. He knew. And we got to a certain point, and this was it. The beginning, he was clinging to me because he didn't want me to leave. I don't want you to leave. I think we can do this. And was very needy. And then about maybe 6 months later, 8 months later, he's like, I get it. If you have to leave, I would hate that. I love you. I want us to be together. I think we're better together. But if you need to, I fully understand. And it was because he was coming to a place of knowing himself and feeling stronger about who he was. And it wasn't coming from a needy spot. It was coming from if that's the right thing to do, then so be it. Both of us will be okay. It's not what I want, but we will both be okay.
Do you ever have a moment where you're like, yeah, it looks promising. There's progress. And then another thought comes in going, yeah, I thought that already before.
Sure. And I can, in coach terms, I can tell you that little inner critic, that little voice that's pessimistic, that brings you down, that keeps you small, that
it's real.
It's real, and it's also there to protect you. Exactly.
Right. So,
but it sounds negative, but it's really there from fear, a fearful and insecure place. And of course that happened to me. Of course, even, I mean...
So there's no guarantee this is going to work.
Of course not. And in everything in life, is this friend still going to be my friend? Am I still going to have this job? Are people still going to like me? Do I still have a place there? That's the sense of belonging that I think if you don't have it within yourself first, you belong to yourself, you have self-compassion, you feel, if the worst thing happens, I'm still going to be okay.
Yeah,
I got to that.
But when the voice shows up, and maybe it happened for you as well. So even though you're aware of all this, it still happens to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
so I call her Gloria. I call her Gloria.
Gloria, okay.
Yeah. Because Gloria shows up to tell me that my shine is gone, my sparkle. You're not interesting anymore. This person's going to leave you. They don't care about what you have to say. And Gloria will poke her head up. And as soon as I hear Gloria, I'm like, hey, Gloria, I hear ya. Do you have something really important to tell me? Like, am I actually in danger here? Do I need to protect myself from something?
Were you calling her Gloria back then?
No.
Okay. That's my point, right?
But I did hear the voice. But I did hear the voice.
You can say it now in retrospect.
Yes.
But back then,
Okay, so I'm not calling her Gloria, but I'm still like, why is this showing up? Is it something I need to be truly afraid of? Or is it just something that I feel because of the situation that I've been in? And here's how I would reconcile that, Muhammad. Was like, yep, that's true. It feels real, and it was true. But is it true now? What's the evidence that I have, honestly, to prove that that is true? And if it was really nagging at me and really bothering me, then I would ask my husband. I'm like, hey, here's something that's been nagging at me for the last couple of days. I can't shake it. I can't use my tools that I've learned in therapy. And it's getting worse. It's festering. So I just have to ask you. And then I would ask him something that was, bothering me. And I think intuitively, too, if we pay attention to our insight and our heart, that sometimes there is really something there and we need to say it. Right? Like, hey, did you reach out to her? Hey, have you looked at anything that's inappropriate? Hey, did you, whatever the question was that was driving me crazy. And I would ask him. But we've both determined that in order to build the trust and to have these conversations, we can't get into our fight position immediately because it would just deter the other from actually feeling safe to answer truthfully.
How do you know when you're, you see you're making, steps forward and you're taking steps back? How do you know the floor when you're taking steps back? How do you know this is like temporary in nature when you're actually going backwards?
Well, you just said it. Like for me,
how do you know when you're there? Like, one step is 2 steps. Could this fall all the way apart? Yeah. And as that starts happening, I imagine there's momentum in that direction too, right?
There can be if you allow yourself to sit in it.
Right. But it's happening now, right? So you're moving, you feel like you're moving backwards.
So I use one of my tools or my strategies. If I feel like I've been stuck in that backward motion or pit for too long, and I know what that feels like, I start isolating. Like my own behavior for that is I isolate. I close everybody off.
Right.
I sit in sadness. I cry a lot. I get angry. I actually break things, and then I finally say, "Do you want to stay here? Do you want to stay here? Because I can certainly choose that path."
That's
and
strategy.
It can get So my strategy is: do you want to stay here, or do you want to get out of this? I want to get out of it. Okay. Well, what do we have on hand? What's available to us? I've got different people I can call for different situations that I know will be there, and they'll give me what I need in that moment. So I can call somebody, I can journal, I can go for a run. Now I do a lot of walking, but back then I still would run, and I would run a lot, and I would run to music that would be therapeutic for me, whether it was hard rock and I was pounding it out doing my air guitar, or I was listening to something that was inspirational and spiritual and that would help calm my nerves. I would breathe, I would stretch. Like, I had a list of things that I knew worked and that would calm me down enough to get me to that state of being rational. Okay, now what? Do I have a conversation with my husband, or is it something I can just work out for myself? If I have a conversation with him, then we make it an appropriate time. It's not immediate, like, hey, I got to talk to you right now. That's unnerving. It'd be like, if you have some time tonight, there's something that I want to chat with you about. Yep, no problem. And then we'd make sure, kids were in bed or doing whatever they needed to do, because while our older kids at that time knew what was happening, we didn't need to burden them with it, right? Like, they were doing their own thing. They were doing their own healing. So we would just have conversations. Usually it was walking side by side, and we would do a heart check. And we would just check in with each other and just say where we were at emotionally, without any accusation, without any, emotions that were highly charged. It was just sort of stating what was happening, and then understanding more. Tell me more about that. When did that start happening? Why were you feeling that way? How are you feeling now? How can I help you? What do you need me to do? These are the questions that brought us closer together, and we were willing to be patient.
Really, it clearly takes both of you to make it that far. And so, on one hand, I want to say, like, kudos to you, and obviously kudos to your husband. And it's like, how do you give a guy kudos?
Yeah,
but
you can.
But you can. I think it requires a lot of remorse, a lot of humility, and not just for show.
No.
Right? So that's amazing. When, like, if you're looking back on it, right? Like, it's hard to tell, I guess, when you're going through that, but was there a time where you're just like, okay, we're over the hard part now, and it's like we're on a track? Was there actually a day like that?
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, this is past halfway? Seriously? Because I think like that, but I can't imagine, is it always like that? But,
yeah, and then there will be some times where I would be triggered by something, a song, a season, a smell, a T-shirt, anything,
A scene in a movie.
Oh, come on. Like, I could not even watch regular TV and movies. It's amazing how much of that stuff is in every kind, even PG-rated family shows. We used to watch This Is Us.
It's funny, actually.
Of course, but it was anything. It didn't even have to be, a sexual scene. It was people lying to each other. It was deception. It was deceit. It was people, like, having inappropriate relationships. It was like...
And it's everywhere.
It's everywhere, and it's in...
And it's okay.
Music and everything else. So for a while, we just didn't do that. And when we did, start watching like just a regular TV show or see a movie, and a scene would come on, it was like, we would stop it.
You'd stop it.
Oh yeah, turn it off. Like, you have a choice. I don't have to stay here and subject myself to this and get more miserable. I'm driving in the car, a song comes on. I don't have to listen to this.
But now you've heard it. Now you've seen it, right? You're already past trigger now.
Yeah, well, yeah, you get triggered.
Right.
You don't have to stay in it, though. So again, those are where the strategies and the tools come in. Like, okay, so do I need to talk to my husband about this? Do I need to just get up and, like, go for a run? Do I just need to do some breathing exercises? And a lot of it is mindset. A lot of it for me was, but it's not now. Now we're in a place of healing and recovery. Now we know each other so much better. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have this. And this, what we have, this rebuild, this repair, this intimacy is so much better than even what we had. And that was how I kept myself focused and centered. Was just saying, yep, that shiz happened. That's true. I can't change it. I can just go forward with it. Do I want to just stay in that pit of, devastation and misery and sadness and depression? No, that's no way to live. I've got a full life. If God hasn't taken me yet, I got a purpose here, but right? So I have a purpose
some people
here.
Still say like, I want my pound of flesh. I want justice.
Yeah, eye for an eye. My nature wants that because I am a person who seeks justice. If I see an injustice happening in the world, I'm all over it. I get I'm that person who comments on social media, okay, people? Yes, it's me.
Right.
I get very triggered by injustices, by unfairness, by somebody being taken advantage of, by the vulnerable. So I now channel that into things that are healthy, though. So I support causes like anti-human trafficking movements. I'm on the board for Bridge North. I do whatever I can to help women who are in vulnerable situations. I help people restore dignity. In my coaching practice, I help a lot of women and people just understand who they are, regain their identity, build confidence, become more courageous, live out their dreams. Just because some crap has happened to you doesn't mean you stop living. It does filter or does change the lens in which you filter information, but that can be good.
So what was that halfway then point? You're like, okay, we're not closer to the end.
We just said it to each other. Like,
really?
Yeah, like when, you go several days, maybe weeks without, an incident or, and I'm talking about like in the first few years, right? Because now we're, 13 years out, we are like, post-crisis marriage for sure. We're thriving. Like we are enjoying our marriage, our life. We're looking forward to retirement in the next, 5 or 6 years. Like we have plans together. We have energy. We love living together. We laugh. We're best friends. Same sense of humor. But doesn't mean that we don't argue. But when we argue about things and we have differences of opinion, I don't feel like, oh my gosh, he's going to leave me if I upset him. And he doesn't feel that way either with me. We discuss things in ways that we still feel very connected and very secure with each other because we did the work. So when you ask me what was that halfway point, I think it wasn't like I can't say, well, August 30th, 2016,
No, I wasn't wondering.
we kind of hit the mark.
Right.
But I do know that, it definitely did take probably about 3 years to feel somewhat stable.
Did you say August 13th?
I said August the 30th, but
30th.
that was,
Okay.
that was
It's
just,
an interesting day for me. Anyway.
Why?
Yeah, I mean,
it just happened.
It's somebody's birthday anyway.
Oh, okay.
My mother-in-law of all people. So I was like, yeah, it's amazing. No, hers is April 30th. I should get that right on screen.
Strike that from the podcast.
I heard you say 13th, actually, which is my wedding date. So it's so interesting. But go on.
August 13th?
August 13th.
Is your wedding? Okay.
It's celebrated.
Yeah. To be honest with you, this is a weird thing and people think this is weird, but we celebrate the day of discovery or his confession.
Right.
It's August 25th.
Right.
And so every year since then, we've had a little celebration because, some people call it D-Day. We call it Redemption Day. It's the day that, the light was shone on our marriage and we had no choice but to just and believe me, Muhammad, I was no angel either. Once he confessed that, I was like, oh, and by the way, here's a couple of secrets I've been keeping too, blah, 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 blah. Because like at that point they didn't even seem that big. It seemed inconsequential compared to, but the point was keeping things from each other in the name of like, well, I don't want to hurt you, actually hurts people more. And it hurts the person who's keeping the secret too. There's a lot of stress associated with that. There's a lot that you have to manage with the deception and the deceit. And what if it does come out? And then what? And like, so we have a rule now, like if we've done something, like keep short accounts. That's also part of forgiveness. Keep short accounts. You've done something wrong. You've said something wrong. Apologize as soon as you possibly can. Because the guilt will eat you up. And guilt is really just a signal, right? Guilt is not terrible. Like, oh, I have this guilt. Good, do something about it. Guilt is a signal like you just need to make a wrong right. Say something, apologize, give the thing back. Be courageous enough to stand up and say, hey, I made a mistake or I've done something wrong. Once you do that, sure, there might be consequences, sure. But the relief that you feel and the integrity that you actually maintain is so much greater than trying to manage the stress of that thing that's hidden. The hiddenness kills us.
Okay, I agree. But there's relief on one side. Then there's consequence on the other side. And those consequences, people know are real because we don't get to this point in our lives if we hadn't already tried it, and then the consequences were like, oh my gosh, why did you have to go say that? Why did you have to go reveal that? Look at how much worse you've made the situation.
Sure, but don't you think the change is so much more important?
Like you made it.
And
you survived it. People don't survive it.
Well,
just
sure,
like that.
sure, people don't. But having the truth out gives the victim or the person who's been perpetrated the choice to now say, I'm going to try to stay with you and do the hard work. Or thank you, now I can get out. It's not fair. Sure, there will be consequences. Sure. And that's natural and that should happen because if the consequence is heavy enough, real change happens. Like, I don't ever want to go through that again. I don't. And I know my husband doesn't either. So the boundaries and the integrity that we put into our marriage now is so much stronger because we know so much is at stake. So much is at stake.
Well, the finest steel goes through the hottest fire, right? So you've been tried in a way.
Oh, for sure.
And you've passed that test, that trial. You can say you've
come forth as gold,
right? Mm-hmm. So that's amazing. Mm-hmm. But now, so then is there a point? Like, obviously, you've got the tattoo now, but like, is there a point there you're like, I forgive.
Yeah. So here's what forgiveness is a process.
Right. Like you don't anticipate this is coming.
No, of course not. And it's easy to forgive things that are not hefty. It's easy to forgive things that are, not so destructive and devastating.
Right.
That's
Spilled
easy.
Milk, right?
So up until that point, my understanding, my belief, my faith calls me towards forgiveness because nobody in this world is perfect. Everybody will make mistakes. Everybody does deserve forgiveness. Not everybody's going to get it, and it's hard to give. But in my belief system, it was like, of course, I would forgive because I don't want to carry that around. I don't want to carry the burden of unforgiveness because that just leads to bitterness and resentment. Right, exactly. So, and up until that point, nothing in my life was so tragic that it wasn't pretty easy to forgive. Until you get something that is like, whoa, that is the unforgivable. Like, how do I recover from this? How do I actually extend forgiveness, mean it, and then actually let it be in me? Right. So here's what I've learned through the process of forgiveness. You never forget, but that doesn't mean you have to bring it up. Right? So bringing it up to other people, to the person who injured and hurt me, and to myself has to stop, even though I want to sometimes, right? It's there. Like I could use something against somebody.
Are you talking about it now?
Yeah. But I don't.
Right.
I capture that thought and I say, I'm not going to do that because I've forgiven. So if I've truly forgiven, then I'm not going to rub that person's face in it.
Right.
So as I catch myself wanting to like throw a jab and go, but you forgave that. Did you really mean that?
So
yes,
that's what I was going to ask you about forgiveness, because I wonder about this all the time. Let me just use a metaphor, maybe really not a good one, but it's like a stock price. you hit a number,
Yep.
and then you can go back down again.
Oh, for sure.
So can you be like forgive and then unforgive and then forgive again and then unforgive and then forgive. Now you're past. Does that happen? Like you forgave and you're like, no, actually, I haven't yet. Mm-hmm. Does that happen? Did that happen for you?
Well, I think you
'Cause
test
I've
yourself.
experienced that.
Yes.
Forgive. And actually, you know what? No, I'm not. I don't forgive.
And why? So why would you question yourself about, have I really forgiven?
Well, because
why?
There's a desire, right? You want to do it. Like you said, you want to let go. There is a benefit to doing it. So, but you're like, in this moment, it's like, in this moment, yes, I have. And then you walk a little further and you think about it more. Maybe
So what's triggering you?
Maybe it's an experience. Maybe it's a thought. Maybe it's my Gloria. Who knows? I have a name for him. But, but the point is that you sort of say, actually, you know what? No, I'm not ready. I thought I was.
Why?
I'm not.
Why?
I don't know.
Because the thought comes in, which triggers a feeling.
Right.
The feeling is anger,
Right.
bitterness, resentment. It's not fair, which then becomes a behavior. I don't think that I've really forgiven that person. In fact, you know what? I hope they die. And that was a bit harsh, but you know what? That's there, right?
Sometimes, like, I thought something is, and
Yeah.
it just isn't. I thought I had $20 in my wallet, and I didn't. And it's like, okay, like.
So
It's
here's
calculated.
what I would suggest, and this is what I do with myself too, because like that does rear its ugly head.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
So it
do I?
happens.
Of
It
course,
happens for you.
Of course, because again, in the humanness,
Yeah. Well, you did
I'm
say
not a
step
saint.
forward and then step back, right?
Right.
It does happen.
Right. Like something will trigger you, and then you feel like, it was so unfair.
Right.
Yes, it was unfair.
Like,
I
how do
don't
you
like that
stay above
happened to
mark?
me.
Yeah.
What are other people thinking? Now they're judging me. How did she stay with him? I stay above that mark by saying, I don't really care. Because where we are right now is really amazing. And we worked really hard, and I'm proud of what we've done. I'm proud of who I've become. I'm proud of my husband. I don't see any reason for it. Yeah, shit thing to do back then. Really stupid choice. But here we are. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn, to grow, to become more intimate, to know each other better, to hold each other, to talk about our fears, our insecurities, to cry with each other, to pray with each other, to love on each other, to plan with each other, to show other people it can be done. Is it the right thing for everybody? No. I mean, in some cases too, I'd say, you know what? Leave that guy or leave that girl. Like, but I'm not the judge. I'm not the judge. And everybody's got their own journey, and time does heal, but not without forgiveness and work and sacrifice. It's not just time itself.
When did you start thinking about now from forgiving to forgiven, right? And you talk about it became a reflection back on yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
That happened after.
So as I shared with you, once he told me this, and then I just blurted out some things that I had been hiding. I'm like, so I'm not so squeaky clean either. And, and I've done things. I've done things that have hurt people intentionally, unintentionally. I've said things. I've, behaviorally, with my emotions. So as I said, I keep short accounts, knowing that, like, have I done something to offend you? I apologize. And I don't apologize because you were offended. I apologize because I did the offending. That's on me. My bad. So therefore, I know that there are things, of course, that I need to be forgiven of. And, just because I might not equate that to be as horrible as what my husband did, somebody else might think what I've done is horrible. It's the worst. Right? I don't know. There's no comparative narrative here. Like, we all are wired differently. We all have different personalities. What hurts you might not hurt me. I might just say, like, oh, that's not such a big deal. Let it roll off. Who cares? Honestly, it's not. I don't know why you're carrying that around with you. Why is that bothering you? I have no right to say that. I don't know how your makeup is. Like, what's your cultural background? What
Right.
trauma you've been through, what your personality type is, what are your strengths, what are your lived experiences. I have no idea about all of that. So who am I to judge what you should get over quickly and what you should fight for? I don't know, I can just hear you. I can just ask you questions. Why does that bother you? Why is it hard for you to forgive? What is it doing to you? How can you get yourself through it? What do you know about yourself? And I think the self-awareness piece is the most important part of it, having these aha moments that life brings you through. And when I say aha, it's not just like, ooh, light bulb goes off,
Right.
which, yes, it is. But to me, it's an acrostic. Yeah, it's an acrostic. It's awareness with honesty that moves to action. Aha. So I have awareness about something now. Oh, our marriage wasn't picture perfect. There were some cracks in it. Let's get honest about it. Where did it come from? When did it start? How did it happen? We can do that in therapy. That's our action. We can make changes. We don't have to stay stuck here. I don't have to keep pointing my finger at you. I can learn something new.
It's amazing that you've gone through both of those experiences, to forgive and to feel forgiven as well, to be forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to ask you which one's harder or not, because I imagine that they're both their own unique type of challenges.
Mm.
But then how then, so you went through that first step, hey, I'm not squeaky clean either. And then what was your next step after that? Like, how do you get to the point from there to I'm forgiven?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again,
go?
It's a process, and it started with hiring a counselor, like stepping across the threshold of a counselor's office where, at 46 years old, I thought, oh my gosh, this is like crazy that we're here, only to walk into the lobby and see people that we know. I'm like, wow. Why are you here? Wow. You have issues too. It's like, right. And one of my friends said to me, we went to therapy the second that my husband and I couldn't, pack the car to go on a camping trip. I was like, well, we need some therapy. I'm like, good for you. Like that shows such strength and insight. Like I would have just covered that up. Like, let's just fight this out. Nobody needs to know our garbage.
Right.
So it was all a process, and it was having the real courage, and I think, and desire for curiosity about who we are and how we're going to make this work. That was kind of intriguing to me. That was sort of fascinating. How are we going to make this work without having, again, the wherewithal, because we've never been down this path before. But having that curiosity actually was a form of fighting the fears. Mm-hmm. And as we kept going back to, therapy and listening and doing the work. I know so many people that go through therapy, their therapist says, hey, you guys should do this exercise. And they walk out and they go, we're not going to do that. Or one's going to do it and one's not going to do it. It's like, right. Okay, she said do this, let's try it. Like we had our hands open and surrendered to whatever was going to help us regain our own understanding of ourselves personally, and then our marriage, and then what we wanted for the future. And I think giving ourselves patience and time, it wasn't going to be like, I literally wanted it to be a 3-month thing. Like basically went in there, we've got 3 months here. Yeah. What can we do? Give me all the things. Let me check the boxes. Fixer. Let's just go. I want to get out of this pain. I want to move on. It did not work like that. 3 months came and went, and I was like, oh, still feel like day one. It was a hard thing.
That's the thing. It's like usually the motivator is progress, and when you're not feeling it, how do you stay motivated?
Yeah, and then you have traumaversaries. Like Christmas comes, and you're like, oh, all the Christmases passed. Were they really that joyful? Oh, our anniversary, like our wedding anniversary. Oh, well, that's tainted now. You broke every vow. Oh, my birthday. Oh, well, I was away on my birthday and you were doing something that, wasn't very celebratory to me, was it? So you have to work through them, and as they come up, anticipate them. For me, it was better not to just shove it down and just white knuckle it and get through the day. I wanted to talk about it and then get through it together. That felt to me more holistic. It felt like we were partnering together and supportive of each other. So it was really about communication, but communication with tenderness, with the tone. And then we learned, like we had to learn how to do it. Did I do this right? Did I upset you more? Could I have done it differently? And actually asking each other those questions and then being honest about, yeah, you could have done it a little bit differently. In fact, you know what? Don't ask me that question right now. Too soon. Don't want to hear it. I know I asked you to be honest, but I don't want to hear that. And okay, that's fine. Yeah, we can talk about it again or never again. Whatever works. We weren't there to destroy each other. We were there to try. We were still friends. And why did we stay together? We still honestly loved each other.
Right.
Like, we really loved each other.
Right. Amazing. Like, both of you, like, remarkable human beings. Remarkable experience, and remarkable also how you stay committed. Like, the intentions are so important, right? Like, if there's no intent, if there's no willingness to do the hard work, stuff like this doesn't just happen by itself. No. You got to really make it happen, and you got to be super, super proactive. You got to go after it. It doesn't just, if you give it time, sort of sort itself out. It'll
rear its ugly head soon enough anyway. You can't suppress
like,
that
so
kind of...
People say time heals, and it's like, well...
Time with what?
Right.
Just time on its own? No, because you're just suppressing and you're shoving down feelings and experiences. And when it goes to the bottom of your soul, it just lifts weights, right? It gets stronger and stronger. And then it's going to erupt. And it causes so many issues.
And it comes out in different ways, right?
Right. Physical health issues. You have migraines, ulcers, cancer, difficulty with digestive system. Like, that's all... That all points to stress. So you can't eliminate stress from your life entirely, but you can manage it better. And so by coming forth and talking about things and doing it in a therapeutic way with people who you trust, who, have your back, whether it's a professional or a best friend, that's integral to anybody's sense of purpose, of belonging, of personhood. You have to have that. And in fact, that shared experience, and studies and research have been done, especially, and this was one from the Allender Institute, but I heard him in an interview, and he was talking about men who were abused as children. He said that sense of, embarrassment, shame, that has been pushed down and not being able to talk about, because as men we can't do that, and you're taken advantage of, and did I like it, and it's just so confusing. But he said that when you get to share a difficult experience with another person who truly does have your best at heart and who can empathize or be compassionate with you and not judge you, there is an actual healing that happens within your brain. So it's not just an emotional healing. There's a neuroscientific healing that happens in your brain. You actually get stronger. You rebuild your mind capacity and you get stronger. Like, that was fascinating to me.
Okay. I've been wanting to ask you this, but I don't know how to, so I'm just going to say it. Like, because we're talking about forgiveness, and being forgiven, and you have experienced it in a way, right? So you're, to me, like, master level of it. But for many people out there, this didn't happen in your case, I think, but for many people, there is no remorse on the other side. Can there be, in your view, a level of forgiveness when there's no remorse, when there's no apology coming? Because you yourself said that the one who forgives actually gains. There's a huge gain, and the gain's worth it.
Yeah.
And I've read somewhere, I think, that only the one who has the power to punish truly has the power to forgive. Right? Because it's in your hands. And sometimes we go through this punishment because we're like, now we're going to show our strength. But it's truly harder to forgive. So there's way more strength involved in forgiving. That's understood.
Mm-hmm.
But when the apology doesn't come, the remorse is not there. That's even harder. Is it even possible, you think?
I think you're right. I think that it is harder. But let me give you another scenario.
You say for somebody who's the other side's just not sorry, but you want that person to also move on. You want that because there's the gain that person gets.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering for that person, how does that person move? And you're a coach now. You walk
mm-hmm.
people through this. In your case, your husband came forth and was like owning it, ready to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
How do people forgive? How do people move and get to a point when there is seemingly no remorse on the other side? There's no apology coming.
So,
and you're not going to get one.
Yeah. So let me paint a different scenario. Say you were 21 years old and a family member really hurt you badly. Really badly. And that person never acknowledged it, maybe wasn't even aware of it. And now they've died.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to ever get some kind of apology from the other person. You're never going to see if there was true remorse, regret.
Or change or anything.
Right. But do you go forward holding on to the unforgiveness and continuing to be bitter and upset and resentful and damaging yourself? Or do you release the injury and that person from what they did? And that's really what it is, right? It's letting them off the hook, which sounds, in our justice system, terrible.
Yeah. I like how you put it, releasing the injury. Like it's releasing the injury from from yourself.
Mm-hmm. So that's where you gain the real strength. I don't believe that the power is in, and superficially, sure, it feels like you have power if you're holding it over the person, right? I'm not going to forgive you. Now I've got the power. Do you really? Because sometimes the other person really doesn't care. Like, okay, whatever. And now you're the one left holding the burden.
Right.
And that person has moved on with their life, has forgotten about it, didn't even really know. It didn't impact them as much as it's impacting you. You're still holding the burden. You're still carrying the heaviness of it. And it's affecting all other areas of your life, your work, your other friendships, your relationships.
Can't watch a movie again?
Your physical
things.
Right. Your mental ability, your emotional well-being. It's affecting all of that. So who is it really damaging? So the other person, you might come forward and say, hey, listen, you really hurt me badly. And I want an apology. And they might go, I'm not giving it to you. I didn't think what I did was so wrong.
Right.
Right? So then now you're left holding the baggage again. It's up to you. How are you going to work through it? Sure, you can hold it over them. They don't care. So case in point, for me, forgiving my husband was a process. I said it immediately because, again, remember, I'm coming from that as my faith background, as my belief. It's like, no, you forgive people. You just forgive people. I was like, I've been forgiven of things, so I forgive you. And he was like, really? You might want to think about that. Like, he actually had the wherewithal to be able to say, I don't know if you can do that so quickly, but thank you. And then as I thought about
that was before you threw the tide or after? I just kind of understand.
Somewhere around that. So it's a blur, Mohammed. I don't know. In that same 24-hour period, let's say. And then, okay, so there's another party involved, obviously. And this was a person in our community. And so I really wanted to forgive her because I thought I have to in order to move on and not hold this grudge. And, that's possible we run into each other and like, how do we reconcile all of this? So originally what I had said to, one of our counselors, somebody that was coming alongside us, I want you to be with us, but I want to have a meeting with her and I want to forgive her and I want to hear her apology. And this very wise person said to me, I think it's great that you want to forgive her, but what if she doesn't apologize? I'm like, well, wait a second. Doesn't it work like that? Doesn't it work like that? You forgive somebody, they apologize for hurting you, or they apologize and then you forgive them? Like, isn't it a two-way thing? No, Not necessarily. Hopefully, in a mature and responsible way, that would happen, but not always. So are you still willing to forgive even if she says, I don't apologize for my actions? And I was like, wait, okay, I'm going to have to rethink this. And then that really began my journey of understanding forgiveness. And sometimes that person is not going to be remorseful. So what do I do with that then? And one of the true signs for me was getting to that place where I could actually say, I wish her well. I wish her and her family well. I hope she has a good life. I hope that she can, recover and have blessings. And I truly meant it. It wasn't like I just said it to somebody or for something. It was like in my own self on a walk. And I was like, no, I really mean that. I really mean that.
And you're better off for it.
Yeah. And here's the other thing. You don't have to reconcile with the person in order to have restoration and forgiveness. It doesn't mean that person now has to come back into your life. It might be terrible. Like it might be a really toxic situation. You don't necessarily have to have, and it could be a split with exactly the same situation that my husband and I went through. But you've separated and it's like, okay, I forgive you, but doesn't mean that I need to have you back in my life. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to come back together. It could be a friend. It could be a boss. It could be a coworker. It could be anybody. You don't have to be in that relationship in order to have experienced and given full forgiveness. It might be better just to be like, nope, we should not be in relationship with each other. Wish you well, carry on.
Forgiveness is mutually exclusive from all of us. It's amazing. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
You are so welcome.
I really appreciate it. I
didn't know we were going to go there today.
I
thought we were going to talk about work.
I had no idea. So just you coming here, and you might have done this before, but I can't imagine it being any easier to work through this. Maybe you make it look easy because you really put in the hard work. It's like somebody who does 100 push-ups. I'm like, oh, that looked easy, but they didn't get there just easily, even if they're making it look easy now. So
exactly.
I really appreciate you coming here and sharing this.